The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is the tragic mass murder of 4 University of Idaho students taken by a monster who had no connection to his victims. It's a case that broke America's heart. Here's the story.
It was a quiet college town until one November night shattered its peace. 4 University of Idaho students were brutally murdered inside their off-campus home, the kind of crime that felt impossible in a place like Moscow. Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan, names that now haunt every headline. The convicted mass murderer, a former criminology student, studied the science of killing while allegedly living out his own dark obsession. In the months that followed, investigators pieced together a trail of cell phone data, DNA, and haunting surveillance images. The community still wrestles with grief and disbelief, asking how could anyone commit such horror and why? Even with a conviction, one truth remains. Justice may close a case, but it never fills the void left behind.
And with this case, there are still lingering questions, and there's still some issues that are still alive today in all of this. I want to begin and focus on one development that's happening relative to the injuries on Kaylee and Kaylee Gonzalez. Take a listen to her father. This was after the sentencing, and he described and disclosed some information that we didn't know about before this. Take a listen.
It was horrific what Kaylee went through. Yeah, and I don't want to protect this guy, but I won't give out all the details. I'll be general, but yeah, she was stabbed over 30 plus times, and she was struck, and there was quite a bit of damage to her face. So this guy's just an absolute monster. Anyone who thinks that he's otherwise, I just looked at pure demons out there. When I was looking at him, we had to stare down. And he's just filled with demons. He's dark pits of eyes, and there's something seriously wrong with that man.
Still, I don't understand how he's been able to make it through all this, Steve Gonzalez. Here's from the autopsy. She had 20-plus stab wounds, sharp force injuries, asphyxial injuries, blunt force injuries, and fatal injuries. Included lacerations in her left lung and liver, subdural bleeds, a stab behind her clavicle that cut her subclavian vein and artery. Now, what I want you to take a look at now, and this is from TikTok. Kaylee's sister was speaking on TikTok about all of this, and here's what she had to say.
Some of the wounds that were made to Kaylee were described as experimental. So a wound that might typically, in its presentation, look defensive, might not have necessarily been defensive. And he was inflicting wounds that, I mean, any logical person would know wouldn't be fatal. There was evidence that he continued the attack after she was no longer even fighting back.
And that's Kaylee's sister, who still has a lot of questions that she says have not been answered by the state in this case. But there she is talking about these wounds being described as experimental. And that brings us to the first question in our investigation. What do the wounds on Kaylee's hands and arms reveal? Here to help answer that question is Shannon Gray, the attorney representing the family of Kaylee Gonzalez, and board-certified forensic pathologist Dr. Priya Banerjee. Dr. Banerjee, I'll begin with you. Is this a common term, this description of experimental wounds? And if so, could you give us some more context and understanding of it?
So it's not something that I use characteristically, but I think what they're getting at is, I mean, this was a deranged murder. Okay. And so what happens is it's almost like an overkill, you know, that if she's already dead, he's still stabbing away. That's a possibility as to why there are these less injurious wounds or experimental. I mean, she sustained a lot of trauma. And the good thing is after you sustain the head trauma, like a subdural, I assume that she would lose consciousness. Okay. And then you have the rash of the injuries. I don't know the order in which this was sustained. I'm just hoping that she was knocked out earlier in the course, but this is heinous. And so there's no logic to how and why he hurt her so vigorously. And, but experimental is not typical. I mean, defensive wounds, yes. And, honestly, she fought hard, it sounds like, to be so injured. But then at some point, the body fails.
And Dr. Banerjee, is it possible to tell if an injury is before or after she has already succumbed to what is happening to her?
Yes. Yes, that's a critical differentiation. So what I like to use, like the ante versus post-mortem wounds, okay? So when there's bleeding with any wound, that means the body is physiologically alive. Now, what that means is, doesn't mean she's conscious, just means that there is a heartbeat and blood pressure, even if it's not strong, for the blood to pump, for the body to pump blood into the wound. So we're going to see bleeding with it, even a blush of bleeding. After someone succumbed to the wounds, like Kaylee, what we'll see is just the wound without bleeding. So that will tell us that she was no longer physiologically alive. And that's really an important differentiation, because sometimes overkill or extra anger is seen in like what we call a coup de grace shot, sometimes a gunshot wound or extra wounds to the body. Even if someone is dismembered, which luckily wasn't in this case, but we know that those wounds don't have bleeding because that's after the body or after the person is dead. It's for disposal purposes. Then there would not be bleeding.
Shannon Gray, what really troubled me here from what Kaylee's sister posted, saying that a level of frustration that the state isn't giving the details that she wanted, that there's a lack of information that she says has created chaos. What is the status of the exchange of information for the family?
Well, I mean, initially it was really, really slow, and we weren't getting what we wanted. Part of it was we had asked initially for a full copy of the discovery, and they said they were going to give it to us, but they didn't. So we had to hammer at them and keep hammering at them. And so and then I got the governor's office involved. And so I contacted the governor of Idaho and said, hey, can you help us out a little bit? And so they put a little bit more pressure on Moscow and Latah County, I think. And so we started getting some regular release. The problem is that, I mean, the release of this discovery is like paper cuts. You're dying by paper cuts. It's, I'll get one once a week, or I'll get twice in a week, and then it goes on and on and on. Instead of just releasing all of the discovery, going through it and getting it out, they continue to just kind of drip it along, which, I firmly believe it just kind of re-victimizes the family over and over again, because we don't really know what's coming out. And we've had some opposition to a lot of the stuff to try to protect the victims' families. But it's this slow drip of discovery, which really, I think, is, you can see when you see Olivia on her Instagram, she looks worn out. I mean, she's tired. She's drained, and the whole family gets drained when you're having to address this week after week after week. So we're hopeful that we'll get the discovery in full, and it won't keep dripping out. So,
and what's the reason? Are they telling you why they're not just handing it over?
Part of it, one of the excuses has been manpower. They have to try to redact so much information. And so I think the governor's office has gotten involved with that to help them out in some way. I don't know if I really buy most of the things that comes out of Latah County, to tell you the truth. We have been, our relationship with that prosecutor's office has been tenuous at best throughout this entire process. And I think now that after the case is done, you even went on to hear that, they were treating us completely different than other families because I was involved. Because there was an attorney that was trying to help a family out through a difficult process, tell them about the criminal justice system, guide them through it, and all of a sudden we became the enemy. And so, it's indicative of what's been going on. So
yeah, I'm trying to think of what's being redacted. Like what are we redacting? This is the family. Dr. Priya Banerjee, from your perspective, whether it's autopsy or other information, could you see any potential reason to redact information for the victim's family after the case has been resolved and is done? What do we want to hide from the family? Who are we protecting?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I'm not usually involved in that process. The autopsy is often attached to the court file as an exhibit, a full exhibit. And so that should be completely accessible. I'm never asked about editing any of it. And usually, in my experiences, after the case has gone to court and been adjudicated, those records are available to the families. I would be really upset, actually, if pieces were missing. I mean, the names of the kids are out there. We know that they're the victims. And so I don't know what they would, exactly who are they protecting, or what are the legal ramifications that they think might happen by releasing the records. It's not clear to me at all.
Yeah, and Shannon, just one final question on that. What type of stuff has been redacted in what you've received? Can you? Is it just names? Is it? I mean, this isn't a case with undercover operations. This isn't a case with confidential informants. There's no secrets that they have to hide in the way they're investigating it. It's a murder that happened. I don't understand that.
I think because there's a mix of 4 victims in the case, and so there's a lot of investigation crossover between those. I think they're very, very weary of releasing any type of information. They only want to release information to Kaylee's family that's related to Kaylee, to Maddie's family that's related to Maddie, Ethan, and Xana, and on and on. So I think that's part of their hesitation, as they are scared to death that they might release something that is a crossover and gives information about one of the other victims to one of the other families. So that's really been kind of the theme of it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, Dr. Priya Banerjee, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Shannon's going to stick with us. Coming up next, should the killer be ordered to pay additional restitution?
You're going to go to hell. I know people believe in other stuff. You're evil.
The Court TV podcast will return.
I want you to understand what the possible penalties are for each of the crimes to which I understand you're going to offer a guilty plea today. You may be required to pay restitution to any victims of the crime.
Okay, so there's the judge mentioning some restitution. Restitution is money that is ordered to compensate victims, right? In whatever respect that it is. And many times when I was a prosecutor, it was a part of many of the plea deals that restitution would be ordered. And if it was a probation deal, they would stay on probation until they paid off their restitution. Here's some of the specifics from this case, and it's created controversy again. The killer agreed to pay about $29,000 in restitution between the families of victims Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin, and reimbursement of the state's Crime Victims Compensation Fund. In addition, prosecutors submitted financial compensation filings to the court last month and sought a combined $27,333 for the families of homicide victims Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan. An itemized statement with receipts for the expenses was filed under seal, but relates to travel and accommodations. So that brings us to the next question in our investigation. Should the killer be ordered to pay additional restitution? Still with us, Shannon Gray, the attorney representing the family of Kaylee Gonzalez, and also joining us, news director, reporter, and storyteller of EastIdahoNews.com, who's covered the story in great detail. Nate Eaton is with us. I wanted to put something else out there and then have our discussion here. The killer filed in opposition to additional restitution. The killer says he doesn't want to pay the requested additional court-ordered restitution, arguing and a new court filing that the victim's relatives received money through GoFundMe campaigns and that he has no ability to pay while serving life in prison. The killer's attorney pointed to multiple GoFundMe campaigns that specifically covered the expenses being sought. The filing details 3 separate GoFundMe campaigns that raised more than $200,000 combined. That's what he filed. Shannon Gray, what's going on here?
Well, I mean, it's a common argument. I've seen it before as a prosecutor and as a criminal defense attorney. You know, the defendants want to get credit for a GoFundMe account. What is remiss here is the fact that complete strangers helping out the victim's family is somehow he's supposed to get a credit for that. The defendant is responsible for restitution underneath the statute. It clearly says that. This is a part of the restitution. He'll be ordered to pay it. I don't think there's any issue about it. And the GoFundMe accounts are really raised by strangers that are helping out the family. It's not the families themselves. And as far as ability to pay, guess what? Most defendants don't have an ability to pay, especially ones that are incarcerated. And then what happens is a lot of times that final restitution payment is turned into a judgment, and then that judgment can be enforced later on. And why is that important? Well, let's say Kohberger down the road wants to sell his story to someone and he makes some money off of it. Well, the families that have a judgment against that, and then they can collect whatever monies that were owed underneath the restitution statute. So,
Shannon, I was just thinking of something, and I don't know if this is even possible. Can you put a lien on his commissary? So to make his life a little bit more uncomfortable while he's in the big house, and, somebody dumps $50 in there, he doesn't get it?
Yeah, I mean, you can garner wages, right? So if that's something that, is accessible, it's probably something in a creative way that someone can probably find out a way to get as much money from me as they can. So I wouldn't put it past anybody nowadays. So
Yeah. So, Nate, this is, this case has caused so much pain, but it just seems this is a defendant who has a lot of audacity, is what I'm taking. Like, he wants credit for, as Shannon said, nice people trying to help out these victims. He seems to have such an inflated ego of himself. I don't think it's just lawyer talk. I think a lot of it comes from him, too.
Here's the thing, Vinny. It is about the money, but it's not about the money. It's about the fact that these victims have a right to it. If all of the victims were millionaires, were well off, and didn't need the money, it still shouldn't matter. The fact of the matter is he pleaded guilty. Part of the law is that he needs to pay restitution. It doesn't matter how much is in a GoFundMe or how much the families have. And I think that's what irritates a lot of people about this. Lori Vallow-Daybell, she's doing the same thing in Arizona. They had a restitution hearing about a month ago that was supposed to be 5-10 minutes, order restitution. She's never going to be able to pay it back. Instead, she's demanding that every single receipt be turned over to the court so that she can review them with her legal team and argue every single penny. I think it just adds more insult to injury to the victims, to those people that have already been through enough. And here we have Bryan Kohberger doing the exact same thing. I do know that in the prison in Idaho, we may talk about this later, they make about 40 cents an hour doing these jobs. And part of what they earn in their jobs, their day-to-day jobs, part of that is garnished, as Shannon was saying. Part of that is garnished for the victims, and it goes to the fund. Is he going to be able to pay nearly $50,000 or over $50,000? No, but it's the principle, I think, that really matters.
Absolutely. Should be same across the board, regardless of who your victim is. Shannon, we saw the social media post from Kelly's sister. How's the rest of the family holding up these days? And especially Steve, who's been so very public and so very vocal through all this. I'm a dad too, Nate's a dad, and I can't imagine being in his shoes. But how would you describe how he is today?
They are a strong family. Steve and I bonded from the get-go. I think that's why we have gone on this journey as long as we have together. He's a great guy. He's the strength for that family. And like they talk about, Some days he has to be the strength. Some days the other people have to be the strength, right, in the family. But, it really gets back to this kind of, the paper cuts with releasing the discovery, right? You're dying a slow death with the paper cuts. I think they want to try to move on, right? And you never fully move on, but to just turn over another chapter of moving forward, but you really can't right now. You still have to try to sort through what happened, find information about what happened. There's still a lot of questions unanswered. We had a really great meeting with the prosecutors and the investigators prior to, the sentencing, but haven't had anything since. So I'm not sure if they forgot about us or whatever it is, but I think they still have a lot of questions that need to be answered, and we're hopeful that we can get some more moving forward.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate you coming on tonight, Shannon Gray. Always great to see you. Please, as always, give our best to Steve and the entire family. Nate's going to stick around. Still to come, what is life like for the killer behind bars?
Now, back to the Court TV podcast.
I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the mass murder of 4 University of Idaho students, a case that has been solved but still holds so many unanswered questions. Here's the story.
The house on King Road is gone now, but its shadow lingers over Moscow, Idaho. 4 young lives, Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan, were taken in a savage act that stunned the nation. Investigators say the killer moved silently through the home, striking with precision and rage. It was a calculated slaughter that left families shattered and a community forever changed. The convicted mass murderer now sits behind bars, his every move studied as obsessively as he once studied crime. Yet still questions echo. Why them? Why that night? And what drove a mind so educated in justice to destroy so much innocence?
He's pleaded guilty. He's admitted it. He escaped a potential death sentence because of the plea deal. But he's serving life. I want you to take a look. This is Idaho's maximum security institution. This is where, presumably, he should be spending the rest of his life behind these walls. There's a lot of questions about that, though. Death row, you get it. You're isolated, you're by yourself, you get outside for maybe an hour, a half hour a day, not a lot of interaction with others, but things are going to be much different for this guy. I want you to take a listen to Kaylee's mother at the sentencing, describing what she thinks life will be like for him.
While I'm disappointed the firing squad won't get to take their shots at you, I'm confident that the men in prison will have their way with you in more ways than one. You will finally get what you wanted, physical touch. Just probably not how you were expecting it. Hell will be waiting. Quick message from our youngest daughter. Aubrey wanted to say, you may have received A's in high school and college, but you're gonna be getting big D's in prison.
So he's behind bars now, and that brings us to the next question in our investigation. What is life like for the killer behind bars? Someone this high profile, someone this notorious, and someone this strange, let's be honest. Here to help answer that question is the founder of On the Tira News, Ahmed Bellozo, and still with us, news director, reporter, and storyteller of EastIdahoNews.com, Nate Eaton. Thank you both for being here. Nate, I want to start with you because you had an opportunity to visit that area, right? The prison, and get an idea. What is physically, what is it like there?
I was able to spend hours inside the facility, the prison right next door to the maximum security prison. Obviously, with maximum security, they're not letting a lot of people go in and out. What we do know about Kohberger is he's isolated. He's in a cell of his own, contact with other inmates is rare for his safety and for their safety, from what the prison officials tell us. And the inmates are segregated based on their behavior. Of course, you have the low-risk inmates, the medium risk, and then the high-risk inmates, which is a lot determines on their crimes, their safety, things like that. Those low-risk inmates that are out there, they can work in a wood shop. They can get a job. All of the license plates in Idaho, those are made there in this prison. So those are, they can make those, they can mail them out, they can go to school, they can take tests to get a GED or a diploma. For those on the higher risk spectrum, like Bryan Kohberger, I imagine life every day is pretty lonely. He gets a couple of meals. He may be let out for 30 minutes to an hour in a very small, isolated area, but he's not out with other inmates talking with them, socializing and playing cards.
That's interesting. And you wonder, he's serving life there. Sometimes your status can change through the years. I'm wondering, Ahmed, let me put this up on the screen for you first, Ahmed, because there was an inmate that was talking about the killer. And this came from Moscow police from a narrative. The inmate told me that the killer quickly became annoying because of his habits. He told me the killer would wash his hands dozens of times each day and would spend 45 minutes to an hour in the shower. I asked the inmate if the killer slept at night. He told me he would be awake almost all night, would only take a nap during the day. And this inmate said that he could hear the killer moving around all night, which also annoyed him. Let me ask you, Ahmed, if he ended up at some point in his life sentence among other inmates, how do you think he would be treated? How would he be received as this notorious mass killer?
Well, being strange in prison is definitely not a good thing. You want to try to blend in as much as you can. Obviously, for the cases that he's been charged and convicted of now, he's going to have that stigma over him, and he's definitely going to have to watch his back. How other inmates react in time, I would imagine that he may end up back in some sort of general population with his behavior or, things of that nature. But I don't think inmates take too kindly to people with cases like that, especially when they act that strange and with those bad habits. So he definitely has a lot of work ahead of him.
Now, there was something else here. This is a handwritten complaint that he filled out, talking about his food in prison. The killer's complaining about his prison food. He's vegan. He accused the staff of depriving him food. I have on several occasions not received all items of food on my tray, he wrote on July 31st in a handwritten complaint, at first reported by the Idaho Statesman. He went on to write that when he brought the issue up during meal service, he did not receive any replacements as requested, and that no one even contacted the kitchen. The policy book confirms items missing which are pointed out during service will be replaced, he wrote. He continued, I wish to, without exception, receive these replacements. The killer then closed out his complaint by writing, the nutritional standard is not being upheld unless I receive my full tray. Ahmed, how does the staff react to people who complain about the food?
Well, unfortunately, even as an inmate, you still have some constitutional rights, some basic human rights that are in the handbook, some due to religion, some due to whatever beliefs that so many people have. So under the Constitution, they try to appease to everybody. And, he's going by the same rules that are allotted to other inmates that are maybe not in solitary confinement like he is or in a high-profile case. But unfortunately, there is annoying inmates like him who like to nitpick and squeeze every little thing that they want. They're spoiled, they're vegan, they're this, they can't eat that. And so he is just, I can see now just by the short segment here that I've been on that he is one of those inmates that definitely will nitpick at everything.
Yeah. By the way, we have some of the leaked video of him while he was incarcerated here. I don't know exactly what he's doing here. But, Nate, this is a guy, I just feel like he's going to be writing a whole lot of letters, like for the next 50, 60 years.
And you know what, Vinny? They are allowed to watch court TV in there. I was amazed when I walked through the prison and was able to talk with inmates, not at the maximum level, but others. They watch faithfully. It's possible he's watching tonight. Another thing about the food is that on the commissary list, it's 11, 12, 13, 14 pages. Some of the inmates bought an actual air fryer, and they order tortillas and refried beans and cheese, and they don't worry about the prison food. They're making quesadillas, and they're making pretty good food there in their cells. Now, would Bryan Kohberger have the funds to do that and make his own special diet? I'm not really sure, but I would imagine he could get stuff off of commissary that might pertain to him more. But they are faithful watchers of this, and so the other inmates that are watching these shows, and they know they're very up to date about what's happening with these crimes. And as you mentioned, they don't have much patience for Bryan Kohberger and inmates like him.
Ahmed, are there guys in prison who are so strange and so bizarre, and he's kind of tall also, that people just kind of stay away from him?
Well, yes and no. People in prison use people like him as targets. Somebody could be having a bad day. Somebody might be trying to reach another portion of the prison or another prison in itself and might use him as a scapegoat to get to where they need. So when you have cases like this and you're high profile and somebody just wants to utilize you in some easy ticket for whatever, for whatever reason, he will definitely be a very, very high target on his back for somebody to utilize him in that manner. He's going to have a rough ride. He's definitely going to have a rough ride as soon as he gets out there.
All right. Ahmed Bellozo, make sure, folks, you check out On the Tira. Amazing reporting, unlike anyone else. I mean, you really do a fantastic job, Ahmed, and we appreciate you being on. Nate,
thank you so much.
Nate's going to stick around. Coming up next, did the killer take a plea to save his sister?
Nobody understands exactly why, but he was stalking them. He was hunting them.
This is the Court TV Podcast.
He is a hollow vessel. Something less than human.
We are done being victims. We are taking back our lives.
Okay. The impact of this case, it was supposed to go to trial. It was supposed to be a death penalty trial. This was the worst of the worst, but there was a deal that was cut. So let's show you the deal, because it was surprising to everyone when it happened. It was surprising to the families. They were not expecting it. Obviously, we weren't expecting it. I don't think anyone was. But let's take a look at that moment.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogan, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonzalez, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
So what changed? This case was being litigated, and all of a sudden, we've got a plea here. Take a look at this. The killer agreed to a plea deal days after his sister was added to the witness list. The prosecution filed its witness list on June 25th. It included Amanda, his sister. 5 days later, on Monday the 30th, the killer apparently agreed to the deal, although I think they were talking about it a couple days before that as well. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. Did the killer take a plea to save his sister? Could that have been the motivation for this? That he didn't want his sister to have to testify? Here to help with our investigation is longtime Massachusetts attorney Rick Grundy, and still with us, news director, reporter, and storyteller, EastIdahoNews.com, Nate Eaton. Nate, was this a coincidence here?
It could be, but it's a really interesting coincidence if it is, Vinny. We have heard from multiple reporters and sources that Bryan Kohberger is close with his family. After the killings, he called his mother and spoke to her at length. The morning after, I believe it was multiple times that day and within those first few days. And then, he rode across the country with his father. This is a guy that's close with his family. And I would imagine once he saw that name on the prosecution list, and she was also on the list for the defense as well, but that's a little different when they're your own witness versus the state's witness. It could have caused him to have second thoughts about, do I really want to go through with this? What are they going to ask her? What is she going to say? And then how do you cross-examine her? What kind of things do you want? So I believe that it weighed heavy on his mind, and I believe that his defense attorney spoke with him about that she's on the list, she's willing to testify for them. You really need to think about it.
Rick Grundy, what are your thoughts here? Have you been involved in cases where a notorious, cold-blooded killer decides to throw in the towel and wants to plead guilty because he wants to spare someone having to testify?
I've had cases where it's been a factor. I wouldn't say I've had a case where it was the factor. And I think that's kind of where I have a problem with this one. I mean, clearly we don't know a lot as to why she was selected from the family members. As Nate mentioned, we know that this guy had some exclusive time right after the homicide with the mother, and then some extensive alone time with the father, but it's the sister that get pulled in. And I haven't heard anything that even hints at what that testimony would be. And so much of this, to me, bounces back on this district attorney's office. I have never had a comfortable feeling with the way that they've handled the case. I appreciate that where you have 4 victims and they're young, so you have extended family. You don't just have a husband, wife. You have mom, dad, siblings. It can be difficult to manage, but I still feel like the plea, unless, again, the defendant is getting some enjoyment out of bringing this family through a trial, the plea in this case was the holdup would be the prosecution, because if you're going to have a death penalty and you have 4 dead kids, this is the place to use it. So all of a sudden they come forward with it, and a defendant, I guess, unless he's especially masochistic, is going to jump on that. So why did the Commonwealth or why did the state suddenly come forth with that is the bigger question to make. And why doesn't the state just say now, we have the sister on the witness list for this particular reason? It harkens back to what Shannon was saying, that there's just not a good feeling for the way the district attorney's office handled this matter overall. And I sensed that from the beginning.
Kaylee's father, Steve Gonzalez, went on News Nation in June to talk about the plea deal. Let's take a listen to that and then listen to the prosecutor.
This is the opposite of our will. There was no majority believing that this was acceptable. I want to honor all the police officers, the FBI, and all the people that work their tail off. The failure is at the court level, 100%.
We respect the families. We realize that we had tough decisions to make, and we made them, but we did not make them in a vacuum. As I said in court today, we reached out to the families. We asked their thoughts. We listened to what they had to say. We accept and recognize that not everybody agrees with the decision we made. We recognize that we could have said, well, in order for us to move forward, we want a factual allocution. But I have to be perfectly candid. I don't believe that there's anything that would come out of his mouth that would be the truth. I don't believe that there's anything that would come out of his mouth that would be anything other than self-serving. And I don't believe there's anything that would come out of his mouth that would not further victimize the families. And so that just simply wasn't a factor. We made our decision based on our assessment of law and the facts. We made our decision based on being able to obtain accountability and certainty, not just for the victims' families, but for the communities, for the state.
Yeah, the certainty was his DNA on the knife sheath found beneath one of the victims. That was the certainty in the case. Nate, in Idaho, how has this been received? Because Idaho, like, you have a death penalty, and as Rick said, like, this is a case for a death penalty. Obviously, mass murder, psychotic defendant, killing for the thrill of the kill, no connection to the victims, yet he doesn't get the death penalty. So what's been sort of the reaction statewide on all this?
I think it's pretty split, Vinny. I think a lot of people really wanted a trial. They wanted to hear all of the witnesses. They wanted to hear all of the evidence, and they wanted a jury to ultimately, they believed, find him guilty. And yes, he likely 99% chance would have been sentenced to death. There's plenty of aggravating factors here. However, there are the other half of the people that agree with Ethan Chapin's family, that they're glad there wasn't a trial, that they didn't have to sit through weeks and weeks of testimony and all of the evidence, that they were simply able to have him plead guilty, have him give up any chance of appeal, have him go sit in a cell the rest of his life, wondering about the prison food and why he's not getting fed appropriately, and not have to worry about it. So it is split. I think there will always be questions about this case. And for some, they're happy, and for others, they're not.
Yeah. Rick, we have about 30 seconds left here. It's a tough job as a prosecutor. You led that office in Massachusetts. How do you determine who gets a deal?
Well, I think you factor in, and this is why I question this particular deal. One of the first things you factor in is the strength of your own case. If you have questions, you start every case I ever prosecuted. I started with that my level had to be personally 100% convinced that this person committed the act. So the next question following that is, what is our evidence? And your evidence isn't going to rise to that level all times, even though you feel that, as to your belief that you can prove it. So that's your first factor. Is there something here that's an appropriate plea that takes into consideration the risk of going to trial?
Yeah,
Again,
I think this one's one that was almost. They're never completely risk-free, but this is as close as you could get. I mean, they had everything. Such a strong case. It was a great investigation. Thanks so much, Rick Grundy, Nate Eaton. Appreciate your valuable time. Now, from my perspective, this plea deal was wrong. Wrong because Idaho is a death penalty state. And if a prosecutor won't seek death against a killer like this, then I do not believe they are actually upholding the law. The death penalty is a punishment, and it's a deterrence tool, not a negotiating tool for prosecutors. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.
There you have it. If you want to see more in-depth reporting on the latest true crime stories, you can see me every weeknight, 8 p.m. Eastern on Closing Arguments. Thank you so much for downloading. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.